Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, all speakers and participants, and welcome to the Regional Government Social Media on Digital Diplomacy 2022. My name is Sabrina, and I am your host for today's session. First of all, we would like to welcome His Excellency Tengku Faiza Shah, Director General for Information and Public Diplomacy. Bapak Hartio Harkomoyo, Director for Information and Media, Ministry for Foreign Affairs, and all speakers, moderator, and participants. Before we start today's session, the Regional Government Social Media on Digital Diplomacy 2022 is a follow-up from the International Conference on Digital Diplomacy that was held in 2021 as an international event involving worldwide experts to share perspective, experiences, researches in the fields of social media and digital diplomacy. Yesterday, on the first and second sessions, we have gathered fruitful insights from our prominent speakers on two topics. First, digital diplomacy through social media, data-driven, and topic number two was how virality affects the course of public policy. And today, for our last session for the Regional Government Social Media and Digital Diplomacy 2022, the topic would be the latest research and future of government, social media, and digital diplomacy. We would like to remind participants that this discussion will be conducted in English and will be streamed live through youtube.com/GSMS Indonesia. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our moderator for this session, Bapak Bagus Muljadi. He facilitates partnerships between UK and Indonesia higher education and research institutions. Also an assistant professor of Chemical and Environmental Engineering at the University of Nottingham with a joint affiliation with Virginia Tech, United States. Prior to joining Nottingham University, he was a postdoctoral research associate at Earth Science and Engineering, Imperial College, London, and at Institut de Mathématiques de Toulouse, France. Well, without further ado, Bapak Moderator, the time and floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sabrina, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I would like to welcome participants again to this wonderful event, the Government Social Media Conference on Digital Diplomacy. It's a very important subject. It coined towards digital and diplomacy, not least because of the ever-changing nature of the geopolitics, particularly that involving environmental issues and sovereignty, the emergence of new policy topics like cybersecurity, e-commerce, AI governance, etc., and particularly also the usage of social media as means to extend government's message and as means to do diplomacy in general. And I couldn't be more excited to discuss today's event, discussing latest research on social media and digital diplomacy, how technology advancement affects social media and digital diplomacy, cases of digital diplomacy by countries, and the lessons that we can all learn today with our competent speakers. So first we will have Dr. Treviliana Eka Putri, researchers from Center for Digital Society, Universitas Gadjah Mada. And our second speaker is also our dear friend, Dr. Yanuar Nugroho, advisor for Center for Innovation Policy and Governance, and as well as visiting research, or senior fellow, visiting senior fellow at IC's Yusuf Ishak Institute. And so before we begin, I would like to also acknowledge facilitation and support from our Director General for Information and Public Diplomacy, Bapak Tengku Faiza Shah, and the Director for Information and Media Services, Bapak Hartio Harkomoyo. So later, after the speakers had presented their materials, I would like to welcome some questions for you. So from you. And then, so if you do have questions, please do either write them in the dialog box or the chat box of the Zoom meetings, and then the admin will give it to me. And provided that we have the time, we will also prioritize these questions to be asked to our speakers. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to welcome our first speakers, Dr. Treviliana Putri, to present her material revolving around latest research and futures of government social media and digital diplomacy. Dr. Trevi, can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you well. So thank you very much, Bagus, for the time and opportunity. And also, I am very humbled to be invited for this event. I have also followed yesterday's event, and I think the development of social media and also digital diplomacy have been elaborated very well as well in the previous events of this summit. So please allow me to share my screen, and probably since I only have about like 10 minutes to give an overview of the latest research and future of government social media and digital diplomacy. It will be a quick overview, but a sum on what's currently happening and the trends as for now. And probably there have been some overlaps also from what has been explained in our presenter in the previous day. But I think this is what's happening, and it's only showing the key trends of the digital diplomacy nowadays. So first, I would like to give an overview of what I'll be presenting today, mainly about the overview of definitions on how digital diplomacy is perceived as for now. It's a form of public diplomacy, or it can also be extended to other things, and how the utilization of social media can be utilized by the government, and also the role of the digital diplomacy aside of like communication, but also for agenda setting, especially for the government. So this is probably a very broad thing and concept, but I think this is also important when we're talking about diplomacy, digital diplomacy. We must also note and kind of like have a brief ideas on what is actually diplomacy. Essentially, and simply put, this is because, you know, like my background is IR, so this is kind of like our first semester students talking about diplomacy. We're talking about how government communicate with foreign publics, with foreign actors, and also interacting, maintaining contact, and negotiate with other states or other international actors, be it states, be it non-governmental institution, and so forth. However, it is also interesting to note that probably if you have heard the term and the concept of multi-track diplomacy, that when we are solving a conflict, when we are trying to solving an international issues, there is more than just one track of diplomacy. It's more than just government in track one, but also there are the other tracks that can be utilized, that can be used through public, through private sectors, through practitioners and professionals among the countries. So as you can see, probably in several events, it's not only about like how the government officials, like the diplomats, doing their thing, but also how public from one country and another country interact to each other. And we go to digital diplomacy. I believe that digitalization, you name it, like in industry 4.0 and things that you have heard from like since I think 5-10 years ago, have been affecting our day-to-day lives and also how we do things. And this is also the same thing with the practice of diplomacy. I put several definition of digital diplomacy here. I think the famous one, like Cornelis Biola here, and how you know, like different authors, different people have different kind of like interpretation of what is actually digital diplomacy. For Manor and Sega, for example, here they emphasize on the social media platform usage, right, for achieving foreign policy goods, and also managing its image and managing country's image and reputation through social media platforms. However, Biola and also Holmes here, expanding it more, rather not to focus only on the utilization of social media by the foreign ministries, but also how to manage change through digital tools and also virtual collaboration. So it's not just about disseminating information, but also how to manage a specific type of change in the international system. So as you can probably see, when we are talking about digital diplomacy, it's not just about like country having social media presence, and also how they interact with other like the public, and how controller can also react and reach their audiences, but also how they kind of like manage things that are currently happening in our digital world as well. In Indonesia, there have been also several research conducted by some professors in Indonesia as well on the digital diplomacy conduct in Indonesia, starting from Twitter, Facebook, and etc. However, things that I would like to emphasize here is that Indonesia itself also has already prepared itself to be paced up and ready for the wave of the digital diplomacy. So, for example, there is some events, of course, and also statement noticing that Indonesia is prepared and also will be joining and also practicing the digital diplomacy more effectively. So, for example, this is the statement by Ibu Retno on how, like the pandemic COVID-19 also make us all shift our traditional way of communication. We cannot really travel that much, but we can do things virtually like what we're doing right now, actually. So things, negotiation through cyberspace, as well as I believe like in the G20 summit now, we are several meetings are being held virtually as well because of the movement mobility restriction due to COVID-19. So this is actually something that is new, but one thing to note is that they really have to take care of also the cybersecurity measure, because some of the meetings are very important and confidential as well. Talking about number, Indonesia's involvement in digital diplomacy, it is currently ranked in 2019, ranked 20 globally and ranked 5 at the level of Asian countries based on the Global Diplomacy Index 2019. So this is actually a really good number, if I may say, that Indonesia has been joining the trend, becoming part of like actively using its social media platforms to be able to present themselves to international audience. And in the latest speech that the Bu Retno also gave, there have been several key benefits that Indonesia affirm about digital diplomacy: to spread message of peace, enhance economic partnership, instrument to protect citizens, and instruments to advance development. So in the case of emergency and in the case of like communication to the diaspora and also people, international audience, the use of social media really help to reach people in a speedy manner, and also it enables them to have a two-way conversation. So this is the form of digital diplomacy as a form of public diplomacy. This is mostly when we talk about digital diplomacy, we're talking about public diplomacy, and also how like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs reach the public, the international audience. This is through the form of official website accounts and also the online presence through social media. And actually, like Indonesian government have also established such a division and also strengthen its presence on several social media platforms through to reach the diaspora and also international audience. So why it is important to have a social media presence? Because when we see the utilization of social media, it increase only exponentially, and it's always growing. And when we look at how social media is being used by foreign ministries, there are a lot of it. There are many of foreign ministries using Twitter, and also followed by Facebook and YouTube, etc. So when we see here, the number is also keep on growing, and also especially in the case of where they cannot really give their speech physically, things can happen on the social media, especially on Twitter. I think many of us have witnessed how several officials giving statement or giving their response towards specific issues through social media, Twitter making it based on the word and the text base. So they're mainly using Twitter as well. Here's probably why on 2013 I just do some kind of a systematic review on how research on social media have been done, and why then public diplomacy is being used on Twitter, and even there is a term coined a triplomacy, for example. It says that social media, and in particular Twitter, improves public diplomacy practice. First, it allows not only asymmetric information but also symmetric information among actors that is involved in the platform, and also the flow of information through social media such as Twitter is enabling the conversation to flow not only from top to the bottom, hierarchical, but also vice versa. Another study, this is actually more on how government probably could use social media as a tool for its nation branding, assessing the case study in China, is how state should actually strengthen its presence on social media, not by trying to prove something that some international audience have already pre-existing belief, but this is the case in China. The study notes that successful nation branding campaign either takes advantage or reinforce the pre-existing mental image of the country. So, for example, probably in the case of China, many international audiences perceived China being strong in the cultural and social aspect, while China themselves actually wanted to show himself or herself as a strong country, a modern, and so forth. However, it is harder to make a new conception of changing what people already believe, rather than utilizing their pre-existing beliefs, but strengthening it to become a strong key points of how would you like China to be. So it is interesting, I think, the finding that, how to, it's kind of like a traditional kind of a branding, but again, this is happening in social media where there are a lot of people, and also things can change very quickly. So I think this finding is also very interesting to note on how you would like to present yourself and also strengthen your public diplomacy in social media. Another research also talk about the utilization of digital diplomacy, not only as public diplomacy tools for sharing information, but also for agenda settings. So this is a comparative study on 2015 on Weibo, actually. So they are looking at how different diplomats use Weibo as media to setting the agenda on how people will look at the country. So There are also differences in the use of Weibo by diplomats of each country, as seen here. So we can see the priority of like what they would like the audience to see about their country. As we can see before about how the practice of digital diplomacy is being done, people are starting to use Twitter. People are being more active on the social media. Things can happen very quickly. Information can be shared not vertically but horizontally and can happen at the very same time. We see there are a lot of benefits on openness, like information flows openly. We can see what's happening. We can also give inputs and give information, spread information in a very timely manner. However, there are also challenges to it. First, this is from Dukambia 2018, but there are a lot of real day events on this impact of our challenges of digital diplomacy. First, tweets and images on social media have the potential to provoke reaction online and offline, which can also incite political crisis. So I think it's very important in the early days when, that very president of the United States using Twitter and also tweet several kind of angered tweets and so forth. It kind of also incite several emotions by the audiences, not only inside the countries, but also international audiences. In a very recent tweet, I just kind of browsed it 1-2 days ago, when a diplomat using her own official account and tweets something that is very sensitive on in a relations between two countries, then it could create rage not only from the domestic audience but also international audience. So I think it is very important for any diplomats, any officials, when you tweet something, you're not tweeting as someone like normal people. You have that position, and it could incite political crisis if you're not sensitive enough of what you're tweeting. That's why it is very important to be able to manage your social media presence, not only for the case of virality, like what we talking about yesterday, but also how you can manage it so that your presence and also what you're talking about is not only furthering the current crisis that your country might have. Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing, challenge of that of the current practice of digital diplomacy is the controls of information flows. Like I mentioned before, you cannot really be the sole holder of what is right, what is not. There will be a lot of information flowing, and audience can pick up any information that they would like. It's very hard to control the information that is being distributed through the social media. Second, balancing the openness versus confidentiality of information. This is very important. Probably some officials think that openness in certain things should be also open to just anyone, but also we know that there is the concern of state security and so forth. So we must also strive for managing the confidentiality of information. Also, third, management of reputational risk that could be impacted arising for the use of digital tools and also social media for dispersing information. Again, as also will be mentioned in many cases of the practice of digitalization and digital tools utilization, cybersecurity challenge have also become one issue. First, cyber hygiene. I know this seems like a very simple thing, but imagine that if an official just not being cautious on how he handles his account, and someday it's getting hacked, and also creating hateful message and so forth, it could be very disastrous. So it is very important also for everyone, actually, not only the officials, to practice the cyber hygiene, to make sure that they will be they're responsible for their account, and whoever tweeting or like posting something from their account, it is themselves, and it's not like being hacked by anyone else. Second, cybersecurity measure and infrastructure. Again, not only about the individuals, but also there is this need for improvement in the measure and also infrastructure that's being established if we want to actually really implement this digital diplomacy, the use of it not only as a form of disbursement of information, but also probably how to detecting, like last time in social media data-driven age, we learn to like the using big data as well, and also social network analysis to kind of like see the public sentiment and how we then would like to project ourselves into the audience. That's why we need to kind of like also have this measure in place, not only by regulation and policy, but also applying stricter kind of like infrastructure to be installed to with like the gadgets that we're using, especially for the officials. Next, we have cyber espionage as well. This has to done also with the cyber security measure and infrastructure, the danger of cyber crimes as well. And also, this is something that will probably more related on the information communication, but the spread of misinformation and disinformation. We would like to give several images in several posting. However, there has been a very massive spread of disinformation against our state, and it is very, very hard. Probably you can imagine what happened with the Ukraine-Russia war in the recent months. There have been so many fake accounts, so many fake news, and also helpful message going on, and it is very hard to control that, especially when there are so many things happening at the same time. So I think that's all very, very, very important to address if we are going to being there and conducting digital diplomacy. At the end, I would like to say that digital diplomacy is just likely here to say, just like also the traditional forms of diplomacy, it wouldn't like totally replace things. It's just, with the traditional diplomacy as well as the digital diplomacy, because now we're kind of like living in the two, like digital environment as well as the physical environment. The cost of it should be reconsidered alongside with the benefits. And I think most of studies talking about digital diplomacy, talking about this government using social media to promote its industry or to promote the tourism industry in the country, and information for those for the international audience, for example. But I think there are more to it, and I think probably there will be more coming on the utilization of digital tools to also serve as a function in several other diplomatic conduct, like the use of, for example, like big data analysis and also the social network analysis to assess the sentiment, assess kind of like what this audience might perceive about yourself. So I think that will be very also interesting to from me
Recording in
today,
progress.
Bagus. Thank you very much, and I'll give the time for Pak Bagus again.
Thank you very much, Mbak Trevi. Please stay with us. I'm looking forward to a lively discussion with you after our second speaker, Pak Yanuar Nugroho, provide his presentation. Pak Yanuar, time is yours.
Thank you, Mas Bagus, but I was informed that the second should be Pak Dedy through the video recording. Am I right?
Yes, apologies. Pak Dedy isn't able to be with us live.
Yeah, so maybe we listen to Pak Dedy first in the video, and then I will come the third, right?
Right, that was originally what is planned. So if that's what you prefer, admin, do you have a recording of Pak Dedy available at the moment? Mas Farhan atau Mas Adib? Great. Okay. So thank you. And very sorry, Pak Yanuar. Indeed, we will play Pak Dedy's video first.
Sure. No worries. No worries.
Mas Adib, Mas Farhan, whenever you're ready, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Pak Teguh Faizasyah, Director General for Information and Public Diplomacy, Pak Yanuar Nugroho, Advisor, Center for Innovation Policy and Governance, Putri Treviliana Putri, Executive Secretary, Center for Digital Society, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Digital transformation has forever changed the way humans communicate and relate to one another. Not only in personal communication we experience this transformation, but even in how I am communicating to all of you right now depicts how digitalization can be used effectively to communicate and establish relations among groups, communities, and even countries. The realization of this impact has sparked the development of digital diplomacy to respond and address various implications of digital transformation. Conceptually, digital diplomacy can be understood at least in two different ways. Firstly, it could be defined as using digital tools in diplomacy. Considering 2/3 of the world population has gone online and the increase of social media users worldwide, discussion on social media could be taken into account in the foreign policy decision-making process. Secondly, digital diplomacy could also be understood as the emergence of new issues in diplomatic agendas related to the digital realm. This could be seen in the emergence of discussion on global cybersecurity, internet governance, cross-border data flow, transnational social online movement, and many other digital-related issues on the international agenda. The development of digital diplomacy can be seen through the Ministry of Communications and Informatics' 4 pillars of digital transformation, namely digital infrastructure, digital government, digital society, and digital economy. Without an advanced digital infrastructure as the foundation of digital development, we will not be able to maximize digital diplomacy's potential. The MCIs works to ensure the affordable internet access is available to all citizens through the deployment of 4G base transceiver station or BTS in more than 12,500 villages, as well as the construction and launch of high-throughput satellite Satria-1 in late 2023 to provide further internet access to 150,000 public facilities nationwide. MCI also strives to strengthen data interoperability through digital government pillar that focuses on developing electronic-based government system or e-government and one data policy in Indonesia. It allows for broader data-driven policymaking and provides digital-based public services such as visa application and migrant worker online service. The massive utilization of digital technology to support diplomacy functions has demanded a resilient digital society. To enhance people's digital readiness, MCI has launched programs from basic digital skill to an advanced level training of digital competency for Indonesia's policymakers. Other than that, Digital Talent Scholarship also provides training of the emerging digital skills, the ABCD, artificial intelligence, blockchain, cloud computing, and data analytics for more than 200,000 participants per year. Lastly, digital economy could be an instrument and tool in diplomacy. In 2021, Indonesia's digital economy value had reached 70 billion US dollars and was projected to contribute to 40% ASEAN market share. This potential could be an excellent opportunity for Indonesian diplomacy to promote further cooperation with other countries. Therefore, MCI supports the digital onboarding of MSMEs and the digital startup movement, which encourages the development of Indonesian digital economy. As Minister Retno Marsudi stated, I believe if used effectively, the internet could become a powerful tool in protecting our citizens and interests abroad. Therefore, we must reinvent our digital diplomacy to raise awareness and development. We are encouraged to reevaluate our approach toward digital diplomacy and look forward to new future opportunities where better understanding of digital diplomacy for our national interests can be achieved. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi Santi Om. Namo Buddhaya.
Apologies in advance. We just hear from our second speaker, which is Bapak Dedy Permadi, Minister Special Advisor for Digital Policy and Human Resources Development and Spokesperson at the Ministry of Communications and Informatics, Republic of Indonesia. I didn't make a good introduction to Pak Dedy. Apologies to those who missed it. And then we are now on to our third speaker, Pak Yanuar Nugroho. Pak Yanuar, thank you for patiently waiting. Whenever you're ready, time is yours.
Thank you, Mas Bagus and colleagues. I have roughly 10 to 15 minutes, right? I will try to be as available.
Yes, you do.
Firstly, thank you very much for inviting me to take part in this important conference. But let me start with a disclaimer. So, one, I'm not going to wear my academic hat only, but also in my experience as a, maybe I would say, a former public official, especially during my time within the executive office of the president. That's one. Number two, I want to be quite candid, Mas Bagus, rather than theoretical or abstract, so that we can have a discussion. Let me start with this data. I know that some scholars dispute or still disagree using Hootsuite, but because this is what is publicly available and easily accessible, I just want to show you some statistics of our digital development worldwide. You can see that out of 8 billion people, nearly about 5.3 billion people are mobile phone users, 5 billion are connected to the internet, and 4.7 billion people are active social media users. You can see all other data, but one thing is clear here, that we become very much connected through this technology. You can see the digital growth overview of internet use. The data is from January, the rest are from July 2022. And you can see the media channels used for news. So people are relying more and more towards online news. Then we have this data. the use of specifically social media as source of news. This data, in a nutshell, is saying that the use of social media or social media has become more and more as source for or of news, whatever it contains, okay, whether you like it or not. But that is the tendency, and the platform being used, we can see from there, number one still Facebook, number two YouTube, and then so on and so forth. Okay, those are the data. Now, what do the research? What about Indonesia, right? This is Indonesia at a glance. 277, nearly 278 million population, 60% urbanized. We have more mobile phone than human being in this country. We have 370 million mobile phone, our mobile connection, okay? So it is 133% of the population. We have 73.7% of the population connected to the internet, and nearly 70% of the population, 68.9%, they are active social media users. And most of them access through mobile phone. So these are the contexts, global and Indonesia. And if you go to the Google Scholar and you put there government social media, and then you will have those academic papers. I only take 2 pages of the latest publication on government social media. You can see the keyword there: institutionalization, legitimacy, public engagement, behavior, okay? Consumption and trust, right? Those are the keywords coming up from the latest research, latest published research on government social media. So you can just go to Google Scholar, put government social media, and then sort from the latest one, 2020. What about digital diplomacy? These are the latest research on digital diplomacy. And again, the keyword would be foreign policy, how we would say about the data, okay? Differences between digital natives and digital immigrants when we talk about digital diplomacy, risk, benefits, then some issues like cybersecurity, strategy. Okay. Those are the latest topics in digital diplomacy. Now, some reality. This happened to me this morning, and I tweeted this morning. I landed from Bangkok at 3:41 a.m. in the morning. Nearly an hour until 4:34 in the morning. The belt for the baggage collection had not moved. I tweeted that, okay? And then you see, for those who don't speak Indonesian, the comment or the reply, okay? The reply basically says, this is not my problem. You, as the passenger, should coordinate with the staff, the ground staff of the airlines. And then I reply back. So you ask the passengers to coordinate with the airline ground staff? Is it really helpful? This is my question. And I mentioned that it is not just about complaint, but this reflects a condition, a circumstances that has to be the attention of the government, of the state-owned enterprise providing those public services. And other people support my argument, basically. So when we talk about social media, what are the real issues actually? Because we need to ask, what does the ICT bring to government's work? To what extent does it help? But also, under which circumstances does it not? Okay? Because although government social media is intended to engage with the citizens, if it does neither not answer nor address their needs and concerns, it has no use. Let me repeat. If social media used by the government does neither answer nor address the needs and concerns of the citizen, it has no use. It would have been much better that the government really concretely, directly address the problems faced by the citizens and bring real solution rather than building image. This is building image, right? You complain, and then in 10 minutes, they respond. But that response does not address the problem. See what I mean? But I stand to be corrected here. Maybe because I come from different generation, okay? Other generations, like many of you here, for example, Gen Z, you are digital native. I'm not digital native. Maybe you are more appreciative to the use of social media by the government. I don't know. This is time for us to discuss. Second key issues on social media, government social media. Government social media sometimes looks a bit cringe, perhaps because they try too hard to be fun, try too hard to be cool, especially to the young audience or citizens. And you know, the results are often exact opposite. Other things, government social media are also often too late in the so-called riding the wave. They are late, even for weeks, in responding viral events that whatever they say in the social media, including gimmicks, have become irrelevant and worse. Sometimes they also responded wrongly and unnecessarily. Next, this takes us to the core, the use of technology. Government could use social media actually as a complaint rather than socialization channel. Again, I stand to be corrected here. Of course, socialization is important, but what has been missing is how citizens can really complain, because that would be much more meaningful for the citizens if they can use government social media. Of course, government can say whatever they want to say, can socialize programs, for example, but when people use it as a complaint channel, it could be more useful and more meaningful. Mentioned very, very eloquently and very correctly two aspects of digital diplomacy: use of the internet and new ICTs to help achieve diplomatic objectives, and second, the interplay between internet and diplomacy. Okay, from internet-driven changes in which diplomacy is conducted to the emergence of new topics on diplomatic agendas, such as cybersecurity, privacy, cross-border, etc., that Dedy already mentioned, along with the use of the internet tools to practice diplomacy. So, it is important that social media as a tool in diplomacy has given way for states to strike up to way of dialogic communication with other diplomatic actors and their foreign publics, unlike the one-way traditional public diplomacy. Because, you know, in traditional diplomacy, it is offline and in a relative privacy. While online diplomacy, there are multitude of actors to discuss foreign policy making, and this can increase the impact of public opinion on foreign policy agenda. Other thing, access to social media as a diplomatic channel has changed actually the relative influence of diplomatic actors. So a study by Manner and Segev 2 years ago, they measure the social media mobility of ministries of foreign affairs and UN missions to New York. And they found that states with less hard power could use social media to become super nodes in online diplomatic networks. So they theorize this as the so-called theory of network diplomacy. So my reflections rather than conclusions are these following. One, there are tensions in the main role of government social media. On the one hand, it is, of course, to disseminate ideas and what the government is or is not doing. This is the core of public policy, right? What the government is doing or is not doing. And the other end is to address citizens' problems. You may not be able to choose either. If you're part of government, you run your government social media, you have to do both. You cannot hide behind the one to avoid responsibility of the other, or the other way around. Okay? That's number one. Tension of the main role of government social media. Number two. Today, data governance is key. No private sector entities, let alone conglomerates, host and control public data. This is important. We can have the debate, we can have the discussion, but data governance is key. Three, democratization of data. Because everyone today can access as well as produce data. Then, earlier speaker already mentioned, these are basically the basic tenets of when we talk about fake news, right? If everyone can say about everything, then the question would be, then where is the truth? Which one is fake? Which one is not fake? 4, digital activism, hence, is important and actually can be an alternative way of engagement. But remember that digital activism is a means, not an end in itself. Because what we want is a more, advanced but also responsible, accountable society and government. Next point, government's digital diplomacy must be established on the principles of trust, open, and participatory. Other consequences would be, this all new technology, new context, require a new generation of civil service. And this is one topic which I think demands or begs serious attention. How we reform our bureaucracy, how we reform our civil service. New technology, new context, new challenge in development in today's daily life require a new generation of civil service. That is the logical consequences. And in the end, the use of technology, government social media included, digital diplomacy included, is actually all about building trust between citizens and their government. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pa Yanuar, indeed, for the insightful presentation. And I'm looking forward to discuss with both of you. Apologies, no questions can be addressed to our second speaker. Sorry, in that case, it's third speaker, Pa Dedy, because there hasn't been any confirmation about whether or not the Menkominfo would answer questions. But I'm going to start with the first questions to discuss amongst you. But Trevi, I think you insinuated the idea of social media as tools, and I think I sentimentally agree with that. And obviously, this is reinforced by Yanuar's presentation, in which some of the data he presented shows that there are even more cellular phones than human beings in Indonesia, than citizens. So what that implies is social media as a very great power or potential power. And then it brings me to the questions whether or not our government has been wielding this power effectively. Now, if you're looking at social media as tools,
it is actually the objective of the very account itself. So I think this is probably more not on a very like digital diplomacy, but probably also like strategy of communication. So what is actually the objectives of that very account, and probably in some other smaller kind of like accounts on like consular information and so forth, there has been more interaction with international audience, and also this information on how to do things, and in case of emergency, giving information. But I think that's still something that's kind of like missing. But I think there have been also several other kind of like research on the like I previously mentioned on the agenda setting of the several foreign embassies in Weibo. I think that is one interesting thing to assess what is the actual objective and policy setting that is being actually utilized by those foreign embassies. But for Indonesia, I have not yet seen actually a very true ones. But probably if I find one, I'll let you know, and everybody know here as well.
Thank you. There isn't one for Indonesia, Pa Yanuar. What's your point? What's your comment on this?
Well, I think to be and to be fair, actually, the government has tried its best at the moment to I would say to consolidate may not be the right word, but to improve the use of digital technology, especially social media. I agree with Trevi, however, that most of them may not be that effective, especially when it is seen from the perspective of this digital native generations. I would say that. I would agree to her. I would agree with her. The challenge at the moment, I think, is that because probably there has been no, I would say, grand strategy of how the government utilize digital technology in general, social media included. That's why it is important, I think, to really realize the so-called digital transformation in the country. I know that some ministries have worked hard, like for example, the Ministry of Health. Perhaps also because of the or due to the pandemic, the development of Peduli Lindungi into a platform that can be utilized. But now also there are criticisms when we cannot really take care of the data or protect the data, for example. Other ministries like Ministry of course, MCI, but also Ministry of Social Affairs, for example, and how they try to restructure and update the poverty data, for example. Or Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Home Affairs for the civil registry, catatan sipil. I think the idea is that I think the government got the idea. It's impossible not utilize, it's impossible not harness the power of this digital technology. The question is how. And I think this is where communities like university, Mbak Trevi, can work in a close, not just close proximity, but hand in hand, join hand with the government, build the capacity. We need to really build the capacity of the government, even I would say, the state capacity to deal with and to utilize this new technology. So yes, Mas Bagus, I agree with
Yes.
Trevi's assessment, but I'm optimistic that the government is going there. Although, of course, the government needs input. The government is not the sole, sole authority on this in terms of as with the ultimate understanding of the development of technology.
Yes, the two of you provided insights into, and I kind of vaguely agree with that, the fact that the Indonesian government can harness more of its power, of the potential of the power of the social media, and that's good. And then we need more fresh blood, let's say, and competent new generation digital users or civil servants. I get that, but at the same time, let's not also pretend that the landscape of social media and digital infrastructure is a level playing field. And then we noticed that some of the examples you've given, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, these are, some of them or most of them are Western-owned private companies, okay? Yeah. And then, well, TikTok probably emerged from China, etc. So, well, certainly this is also provided benefits for the country who owns the platforms to use it. And then, in fact, you have seen the public officials gathering somewhere in Palo Alto and then trying to work out some of their, best strategies together with entrepreneurs and techs. Do you see this happening in Indonesia? And if you do agree that this is something of an equal playing field, what is our strategy to catch up with these countries? Pak Yanuar first, perhaps. Do you have any take on that?
Okay. So I think I agree with you, Mas Bagus, and again, I think it is time, and I wonder if through this forum we can push this agenda forward. That we need a solid digital strategy as a government, as a country. We need to have that. And it is not just because of the government business process, no, but because digital technology has affected many, if not all, aspects of its citizens' life. Second issue would be the governance and accountability. And I think you may have heard, and I believe you have learned something about this accountability of platform. On the one hand, of course, technology users they have their responsibility when they do something online. Okay, but also the platforms let things happen as well. And somehow they escape the responsibility, or they escape to be held responsible of what's going on in that platform. And I think this is where the governance is important. And I think the real discussion, the real talk between the government and platform owner of this big tech company needs to happen. The issue of cybersecurity, the issue of protection of privacy data or private data protection, for example. These are big. Can you imagine, Mas Bagus, when your health record is shared out there without you know it? I think this is really, really serious. We need to be able now to make sure that both the government, not both, all, the government, the platform, and the user, they all have their responsibility. They should be held accountable. So I think we need to go to that direction. But again, I would start, if I may, not represent the government, but see or put myself in the government's shoes. I think what we need to have a digital strategy or digital transformation strategy as a country. I think this is a really pressing issue. I will stop here. Maybe can add some more.
But Trevi, do we have a strategy dealing with these companies, cybersecurity? How do you weigh in on this?
Okay. Firstly, I would like to second Mas Yanuar's statement about the need for a real digital transformation strategy that will be translated to every government's like policies, activities, and so forth. And then also the need for accountability. However, I would like to also note that while one thing, it is important probably to have, like the platform also talk or like in discussion with the government also to help them to boost kind of like the utilization of social media and so forth. But on the other side, we may also witness the emergence of such, like critical perspective on it, on looking at how, like one time social media platform, once they seen as being too close to the government, and then how there are issues of censorship and also circulation of news that is seen to be like in support to the ruling government and not in support of like the need for freedom of expression and freedom of information from the citizen itself. So I think the balance should be there, like like social media platform first should be held accountable also on things that might happen on their platform. First, we are mostly just the consumer, like Pak Bagus mentioned before. We don't have any kind of like local social media yet, I think. Like when the government tries to kind of like ban the existing social media platform, but then what do we have? We don't have anything yet as far now. So first, I think it's important if like, they can go together in kind of like creating a better and safer platform, social media platform, and also communication to their respective audience. But also we must also be critical on seeing the relation as well, because probably there's sentiments and probably some critical views that the government can also disperse some information that is only on their interest and not on the interest of the public. So I think, and that should be reflected on the platform's community standard as well, to uphold public needs firsthand. So yeah, I think that's where the balance is needed.
You mentioned this term, mental image, if I'm not mistaken. So it is quite interesting one, because not just the contents of what's being posted on Twitter or Facebook, but also the company makes policies in regards to who to censor and who to let speak, and etc. Provides this mental image of Western liberal values or the opposite values akin to that of the Chinese governments and etc. And then so we're in the middle of this war, you see, because we have this high-profile banning of Donald Trump in the US, for example. This is not just policy of Twitter. This is also a mental image of the Western values or something like that. And then we are in the mix. Perhaps one that might be banned in the US might not be banned in China. That's my point is. Now, we're in the middle of this. How do we, not expose, but how do we extend externally our image as a countries in regards to how we deal with these policies? Are we the one that would champion or tilt towards freedom of speech, or are we tilting towards, whatever that is not the freedom of speech? So how, this is rather philosophical, but I'm really curious about your take in this, Pak Yanuar first.
It's a very tough question, Mas Bagus. You do your job very, very well as a moderator and giving us questions. I understand and I think this debate would continue. Because I think it roots very much in the understanding, if I may, about state ideology. If we really, and I really don't know whether state ideology guides us or not, actually, because we may have different understandings or different takes on this, I would say, technological progress, say, but I think in the core values of freedom, and the core, or freedom of expression, the core values of independence, I think we should not compromise what our founding fathers have put in the Constitution. And if I read correctly and carefully the constitutions, I think that already gives us quite a clear direction. Now the question is how we operationalize that. And I think, I'm sorry to be again rather blunt or vivid here or candid here, that I think the so-called self-serving interest of the short-term politics clouds or have clouded so many policies in that. Because you don't want to be seen bad, because you don't want to be seen incompetent, then you ban the law, or you utilize, you take benefit, you use even, I would use the word manipulate, policy and regulations to your benefit. And I think that is why I put in my slides, this digital activism is important. When all channels to engage, to speak, to talk, and I see one question in the chat is about that, to the government is closed. I think this digital technology gives us another way. And if the government has no imagination, I would say, or has no quite clear understanding on what technology can do to that, I'm afraid that the approach would be more coercive or more limiting. You should not do that. You should not do that. You ban this. You cut the communications. You lower the bandwidth. If you remember what happened some times ago when there was like a heightened conflict in certain areas of Indonesia, and that area made like blank spot in terms of access to to the internet. Those kind of things, I think, we need to really speak up. And that's why I welcome when the UN, there has been discussion in the UN, making access to internet part of human rights. Making access to technology, digital technology is a part of human rights. I don't know how far it is going at the moment. But I think, you ask me, again, that's my take. I cannot speak on behalf of the government, of course, Mas Bagus, but I'm glad that you put this discussion forward. Actually, I really want to hear from Mbak Trevi as an academic.
Go ahead, Mbak Trevi.
Okay, thank you, Pak Bagus and Pak Yanuar. I think I seconded like what you've been telling about like the coercive measure and so forth. So I think when we're talking about freedom of speech, freedom of information, it is actually protected under the Constitution. So if we want to plainly say that, do we want to have freedom of information and freedom of speech? Yes. But how is it translated into practice? That's, again, another question. When we're talking about the issue of what Pak Yanuar mentioned before about the conflicts arising in several areas in Indonesia, when we are talking about the spread of hateful messages in those social media platforms, the current government strategies is mainly to kind of like elevate the issue to not becoming the day-to-day and like being like solved into the day-to-day regulation and politics, but instead making it as a security issue and elevating it to become something that is in like imminent danger. I don't know, like, I think it is very important to note that yes, social media can have the effect, the multiplier effect, and you can spread message in a very, very fast way. And even there were, I think, research stating that fake news spread multiple times faster than its qualification or its truth. That's probably something that is true, and also, something that we have to mitigate. However, the course of action that the government is currently doing, from my brief assessment on overview, probably Pak Dedy will also know it better, but this is a tendency to make it as a imminent danger moves, so that it is only right to do several extra measure. That is banning, that is making a blank spot, that is closing the connection, closing the platform, etc. So there is this kind of like discussion. I don't know where will it ends or where it will, when can we kind of like discuss it, but like the balance between security of the people and also the freedom of expression, freedom of information itself. It is true that we have to have access, like, I think in several occasions like that, people even do not know how their family well-being in that conflict area because the connection is just not there. But also there is this circulating fake news, hate message spread through several platforms that it could also be very harmful for the people. I think first, social media have to be held accountable and have to react very like in fast and speedy manner. I think you may remember in New Zealand when there was shooting and there was a failure to stop the live streaming of videos of the shooter, so that it's like spread very fastly. But I think that's also one thing that we need to kind of like assess how well social media handle those kind of like harmful messages, but also second, this balance of like securitization of issue, and as well as the right of people to really have the access for information and knowledge. So yeah, that is my take for that one.
Yeah, interesting. What I can summarize from perhaps both of your answers are that, albeit new in terms of technological architecture, actually, as locus of power, social media is subject to same old story, that is balancing security and freedom and something like that. It's always the case, and this is not a trivial issue. And I, for one, not the one to form your opinion or those who are listening here, but you could see the examples of social media being utilized very differently when assessing the problems in Ukraine and in Russia, right? You would see very different images in Russian social media about what's happening in Ukraine. Elsewhere, where I'm sitting here in the UK, everything is quite the opposite. And then so I'm sure we could exhaust that in another similar 3 days event. But I would like to move on because Pak Yanuar gave a very interesting thing about social media utilized by Indonesian government officials, focusing partly, or if not largely, on activities rather than using it for its original intended purpose. Let's say, I put it in a quotation mark because I wasn't sure about what the purpose is supposed to be. I would argue this: more than the content and the fluency of using the technology as means to extend messages, the ethics or etiquette is also important in terms of using that. Now, Pak Yanuar is certainly familiar with this, having been a researcher in the UK, where I'm work right now. That the UK has quite an explicit code of practice for their civil servants when it comes to utilizing social media. We were both at the campus, and there's this explicit code of practice of using social media, albeit in personal circumstance. Where are we at the moment in Indonesia when it comes to etiquettes? And who's responsible to uphold that?
Good questions. The answer is that the official etiquette for civil service in using social media is none. There is no official ethic. What we have is that different institutions will start inside their own ethical, I would say, ethical standard in using social media. For example, when I was in the office of the president, I would say the word tell. I told my staff that they cannot update their status using the materials or activities from the office of the president. Like, for example, I invited them to a closed meeting, and then they will update their status. I'm in a closed meeting discussing this. No way, okay? Their social media is their private things. They can share their private activities. It's okay, but not sharing things that are not supposed to be shared by them. But I agree with you that it is not easy to strike a balance, you know, to make sure that this ethics is there. And because when we talk about ethics, what is good for someone may not as good for someone else, right? So the questions and the notations of good and bad is always contested. So I think we need to come clear with rather than etiquette, which requires lots of literacy, I would say. We need to have like a clear code of conduct. And I think, back again, for example, is it okay if a social media channel of a certain ministry has most of the contents is about what the minister is doing, including in his or her spare time, for example? Is it okay? You can argue for or against. You can argue, of course, because this is to inspire people. But is that the intention? And again, we will debate. And I think in the light of this absence of both etiquette and code of conduct in using social media, I think it is now really a time for us to start thinking about it. And especially when we deal with these new generations of civil service.
Thank you. But should we have a...
Sorry?
Go on, please. Sorry, Pak Yanuar.
No, I mean, for example, if you're a public official, you're taken oath, okay? You took your oath to protect the country, not to, to protect even its secrecy and etc. To what extent this is reflected in the online realm? Not just social media, but also in the online realm, right? And I think, again, when we talk about literacy of the citizens in using ICT, I'm afraid that we also need to talk about literacy of the government itself. To use that, I think. Sorry, not to answer directly your questions, but rather
to some degree, yes. To some degree, it does.
Put more questions in answering your questions. But that's my concern. You remember, Mas Bagus? I still remember my time when I was still in Manchester. It was very clear, for example, that we should not add our direct students or to say that we did as friend in Facebook at that time and in Manchester, and then the rules was revised along the way. So also it needs, understanding, and that understanding grows along the time. So rules are also like that, I think. So rules, regulation, ethics, we need to have it, but we need to also be able to make it, adaptable and also updated. I will stop here.
But Revi, should we have a top-down rules, let's say, or code of practice in terms of regulating how do we behave in social media, in addition to being literate in using it?
Thank you for raising the issue, Pak Bagus and also Pak Yanuar. So I think we can remember I don't know, last year or some months ago, there was this report on digital civility index, and Indonesian netizen was scored, I think, the lowest in ASEAN, and it is stated that Indonesian netizens are having the lowest civility index in Southeast Asia, because there were so many hateful message, bullying, etc. on social media, and also not only on social media but also online gaming platform coming from the Indonesian netizens. So I think that was a very wake up call for us all. I think many netizens also started to discuss about it. And when you mentioned about etiquette, yes, I think it is very important for every level. I mean, I'm also a lecturer at my department, and one might expect someone who have entered university level might have a better etiquette and also better way of communicating to their lecturers and also their staffs. But well, throughout the years, I've been managing some administrative stuff at the department. Like the etiquette and also the way how to communicate digitally has not been very well, if I may say. So I have to second the report that probably the civility index is not that good for the Indonesians. First, literacy is very important, and who is responsible for that? Of course, like everyone at all level. The government, of course, we have seen, I think, from the MCI, the digital literacy movement, and also there were some workshops at every level to kind of like have people trained to better communicate through digital means, and also at any education level, I think. So it has to start somewhere, but it is not just for the government to kind of like give a top-down regulation. It will be good if, like as Pak Yanuar mentioned before in the civil service, because there's so many confidentiality and everyone has to apply a very strict cyber hygiene, but also for all level of education, every citizen, it is our homework as a community. It's not just one person problem, but it needs a collective action from everyone. So I think that's my take for, especially in the notes of like etiquette in the cyber virtual setting.
Thank you, Mbak Trevi. So as I am asking you these questions, this actually overlap with some of the questions that have been raised either through YouTube or through a Zoom meeting here. Mr. Juni, for example, asked about the global perceptions of behavior of Indonesian internet users, which you, Mbak Trevi, had addressed in your last comments, for example. And then Mr. Akshal from Health Ministry. So how to overcome cybersecurity challenges, because recently cybersecurity has become a major fear in digital world. And this is an interesting topic, because I think Pak Yanuar, you also mentioned a little bit about the importance of cybersecurity in your presentation, if I'm not mistaken. And this is personal sentiment. I am very accustomed to communicating with Indonesian stakeholders, either in the academias or in the government officials, using, let's say, less than formal means of communications. It is something that is not common to the Brits, for example, overutilization of WhatsApps or Gmails or something like that. You see this happening in Indonesia. How do you think this is fair, or whether or not this has implication to cybersecurity? What is your overarching view about how we have dealt as a country when it comes to cybersecurity issues? Pak Yanuar first. Sorry, you're muted. Apologies.
Sorry, I didn't realize I muted myself. Okay. Interesting questions, Mas Bagus, and I think cybersecurity has been a threat for everyone. So I just returned from Bangkok this early morning. because for 3 days I attended the so-called crime prevention and criminal justice ASEAN conference in Bangkok. And one topic is about the use of digital technology in providing justice system to ensure everyone has equal access to justice systems. And another aspect is how this cybersecurity has now even dominated the discourse in the criminal prevention, crime prevention and criminal justice discussion. And I think this is one of the issues that no single government alone can deal with, Mas Bagus. Because cybersecurity would relate to other governments' sovereignty as well, because it is cross-border in nature. Because, you know, like for example, when we debate about the common, who owns the internet? When something happens in the internet, under which jurisdiction you would take that. So I think the issue of cybersecurity needs to be approached not in isolation, not by a single government, but in, I would say, perhaps multilateral approach. And this is why I believe when Dedy mentioned that digital diplomacy is not only the use of digital technology in diplomacy, but also because we are discussing about new aspects in the diplomacy, and cybersecurity is one of it. I think that's how I would take this. That's why, again, back to my first and utmost proposal. A country as big as Indonesia, an economy as big as Indonesia, let alone if we aspire to be the biggest, the top 4 or 5 economy in the world by 2045, we need to have digital transformation strategy. We have to have it. I cannot stress more. We have to have it, because then we have to have a strategy how we deal with this.
Yanuar seems to have frozen. We'll give a couple of seconds to wait, perhaps.
That there is no cyberbullying, that there is no, you know, those things. We need to protect our citizens as much as we protect them offline. We need to be able to protect them online. And I think, if I may employ to the committee of this conference in the GSMS, I think maybe one biggest call is there is no better time than now for the country to really have a digital transformation strategy. That's it, Mas Bagus.
Thank you. But Trevi, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, probably just adding several things on the Indonesian cybersecurity aspect. First, if we look at the statistic, actually Indonesia is also a country that is mostly become the source of cyber attack in ASEAN, as well as the recipient of attack. So it's kind, I don't know, like things have been going on that the source of the attack and also the victim of the attack, Indonesia is like the champion. So that's very sad, actually. And looking at that, looking at the recent development, we must also note that looking at cybersecurity at different level, like individually, like before we look at how people at the government utilizing digital tools and also starting using social media to kind of like share their information and also their day-to-day activities, for example. And some might miss the information on not to exposing several confidential data. Well, when we're talking about data, I think it's also very saddening. I think the recent development of how many data leak coming even from government agencies And even for now, I think many of us Indonesian citizens think that, well, in at start, probably we're just like kind of like why it happened, and then it happened again, and then we kind of like, oh, probably um, uh, it's just we're just destined to have our data leaked because we're living in Indonesia.
Do you feel as a researcher though you've been involved enough to prevent such thing from happening?
Well, that is very difficult. You know what? I think there's so many. There's so many things happening from different level of government agency. I think Pak Yanuar mentioned before, even one agency's data on, like the number of civil service in Indonesia. If we're talking from the ministry who handle the I don't know what's in English, but like Pan RP and like the number of like civil service, and then when you look at the data coming from the other ministry, it's different. So even from the start, actually, there has been very unique case in Indonesia about like how the data is being handled, and I don't think like I'm not sure it, and probably I do not myself have the access on how to kind of like involve in how to prevent the data leak, and even I'm not sure how the SOP or code of conduct is being handled within different ministries, different government agencies. So yes, yeah, I'm not sure like how things got out like that, but seeing how some even we still have to photocopy our identity card, and sometimes it end up in my nearest gorengan stall. So I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Indeed, in the UK or those who are residing in Europe, we have this GDPR policy that is ever so present in our way of life as an academic and elsewhere. But Pak Yanuar mentioned a really important point. This is a multilateral issue. This is not something that every government can tackle alone. And this is also both well with the question from Karina. It's not a question, it's an input. Karina from Ministry of Health mentioned that the Korean government had created creative content agencies in 8 different countries. And then so they, I think they go beyond finding a solution for their own problem, but also more like an offensive type of policies. And then that is extending their interest using social media and using digital architecture to promote their own interests elsewhere. Now, to segue from our previous topic to this one, because this is now the issue about promoting our interests multilaterally or bilaterally using social media or digital architecture as tools. Now, in a recent survey by Brand Finance, it was a private company in the UK that measures countries' soft power. Okay, one of the criteria by which soft power is measured is media and communications. And I think in it, it's implicit the role of digital technology and in it diplomacy. We don't fare very well at the moment. And then there is some issue about, and also this is the sentiment is explicit in the articles, I think in Jakarta versus 2014, that says Indonesia is the biggest invisible country in the world. We are the 4th by population number, but we are vaguely invisible. Why is that? What has to change? Aren't we loud enough? Aren't the 300 million cellular phones tweeting every day not loud enough? Why are we still invisible? And why are we not optimally in rankings of soft powers and etc.? But Trevi first, perhaps.
Okay, so I'm interested actually with Karina's comment on the chat, how Korean have always been utilizing the digital environment to their country's best interest, especially in the soft power. I think like in Indonesia as well. Like now, who doesn't know BTS? I mean, like everyone knows about it. It's been the face of many e-commerce as well. So it's really there and we can really feel the presence of it. In the case of Indonesia, I would like to probably refer to also another aspect of cultural diplomacy that is probably also kind of like the same with the case of like the soft power and the cultural diplomacy practice of Indonesia through social media. When we're talking about Indonesian cuisine, like abroad, in comparison to other Southeast Asian countries, when you're visiting like the UK or Australia or like the US, it is very easy for us to find a Thai restaurant. And we know like the food coming like from Thai is like a pad Thai, tom yum goong, and it's kind of like already also been promoted by the government to promote those very food to be able to presenting the country and also then kind of like make it for the audience, for the people living in those countries, accept the Thai food and then becoming interested in the Thai culture and then becoming interested in visiting Thailand and so forth. But for Indonesia, I mean, the problem, I think, there's so many diversities. I mean, that could be a strong factor, but also when we want to promote something, we need to focus on specific thing that we want to boost. And the kind of thing that's probably happening, I'm not sure, I can be wrong on it, but we have so many things we want to promote, then we do not really focus on anything. So we want to do this, this, and this, but then nothing is really strong enough to make our presence become strong. And I think that probably could be also the case on how like the government or like any officials wanted to promote Indonesia and presenting Indonesia in the social media. There's so many things about us we want to share, but there is no specific thing that we want everyone to like, you know, like first thing to remember about Indonesia is this thing, because there's so a lot of like varieties that we want to promoting. If we have that 1, 2, 3 things that could strongly be promoted, probably that could be good. But again, to pick only one to represent the whole Indonesia with so many diversities could also be another questions, like how would that only represent the whole Indonesia and so forth. So I think that becomes the case of problems that might also happen with how, you know, like the social media presence and what the government is trying, or like us as a society also wants to boost our presence in the social media. So yeah, that's my take on it, Mas Bagus.
Okay. Thank you. Pak Yanuar, our presence globally, what's your take on that?
I would agree with Trevi, Mas Bagus. I think the diplomacy you mentioned, right, about soft diplomacy and also hard diplomacy, and I think one of this soft diplomacy is basically promotion of what is good from us as a country, and I think the use of technology should be able to help us boost that image or boost that uniqueness. And I understand that with this kind of diversity, with this kind of richness we have, we may be at the moment very, very difficult in choosing which one or which ones. So while I agree to Mbak Trevi's analysis on why this happened, I also think that the government could, again, actually have a clear strategy in promoting the country. We once were successful in promoting, if you remember, from the Ministry of Tourism. What's the name? Indonesia. Do you remember the tagline that was put in
the catchphrase? Indonesia, forget.
Even basis in London. They have that.
Yeah, please don't use my ignorance as a.
I know. But I think it was among the most, I would say, among the most successful, like nation branding. We don't have this strategy. And I think that one was among the most successful. It shows us that when we have focus, we have strategy, we can be there. But when we lose our focus, we want to do everything. When someone asks you, Mas Bagus, what do you want to do? We have the, and then you said, I want to do everything. That means you don't have any focus, right? Any priorities. So yes, we need to have that, and that's how we must make sure that such strategy exists. Second, however, I was reluctant actually to show this picture earlier, but now I want to show you. You mentioned the research from 2014. I took this from 2016 because I could not find the more updated. If you can find, it will be helpful. But in Q2 2016, the most annoying industry on social media is government. Most annoying industry on social media is government. And I think this reflects how lagging behind the government is when we talk about the use of social media for some productive avenues. This is what I'm going to.
Apologies, Pak Yanuar, was that for Indonesia specifically or
globally?
Oh, for globally. Okay. Okay.
Globally. It is not for Indonesia. It was globally. So you can find it in the Sprout Social. Unfortunately, I could not find the more updated data. The last data was in the second quarter of 2016. Okay.
Yeah.
So this stigma, it's not only Indonesia, even worldwide. I think the difference would be how the maturity of the society, how the literacy of the society that makes the difference, right? In certain contexts, the incompetence or the annoyance of that would be faced, fiercely. In other contexts, they just think, well, my government is not that competent, full stop, and then they didn't do anything, for example. Yeah. But again, I think it is a good time again to call for more meaningful use of technology, I would say, more generally, or digital technology, more generally, rather than only social media, in government works, from national branding or from nation branding into delivering public services. Because I think that's the ultimate raison d'etre, the reason why the government is there, why the people elect their government, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good insight. Now, okay, we're getting closer towards the end of this session. Originally, we were to discuss some case studies. We were to discuss some latest research, but we go beyond that a little bit, and there's a lot more rich insights from Pak Yanuar and Pak Trevi, extending beyond the roles of government in cybersecurity, our image in globally. While offering you for giving your closing remarks, I would like to ask you whether you have some. You mentioned about this, Pak Yanuar. We have so many focuses that becomes shopping lists rather than priorities. Because I could sympathize with that, because whenever you ask the public or anyone what our priorities should be, everybody will have their own priorities, and then you're always bogged down into the problem of ranking priorities, and nobody likes when their priorities are ranked low. But I can sympathize with that. But if you can choose to rank priorities, and as to you give your closing remarks, what would be your top 2 or 3 what the government, talking about the government, should do as the immediate priorities in terms of using our social media and digital diplomacy tool most effectively? And then we go to Mbak Trevi after that.
Thank you, Mas Bagus. I think if I may mention two or three top priorities. Number one, reforming the bureaucracy so that it is more adept, literate in embracing rather than just using, embracing this new technology as well as understanding the new context of our daily life. Our life has become so complex, with the challenges from pandemic to climate crisis, from poverty to everything. It needs, but also at the same time, the progress of technology. So it needs a reform bureaucracy, capable bureaucracy to deal with this, including and to deal with the new technology, digital technology. Second, the priority of using the technology should be to help government deliver better public service. And if I may choose, health and education. Any complaints, any inputs from the citizens about the government's development undertaking in these two sectors must be answered. Health and education, because they are among the most important. This is my take on the, so one, bureaucracy reform. Second, the use of technology, including social media and also diplomacy, to ensure better delivery of public services. And again, within public services, I will choose to health, education. I think we do this. I think we are closer to what we want, to be an advanced society. I think.
Thank you. Thank you. Great takeaway. Mbak Trevi?
Okay, so probably there's some more general takeaways on the context of digital diplomacy. We were talking about social media utilization, but we probably as officials, countries can do more by not just focusing on the number of followers and interactions and number of things like that. That is very, kind of like only number, but not essential and meaningful. I think Pak Yanuar has mentioned before, yes, there is answer, but does that answer really solve the problems, really answer the issues? So I think that is something that needs to also be addressed. And the other one is that when we are talking about digital diplomacy, we're not only talking about our social media presence, but also the ever-evolving issues of digital and cyber world. We witness the recent issues, emergence of cybersecurity issues, and also cyber espionage, and it's also about cross-border data flow. I think this is something that we will be talking more about in the upcoming years. So I think that is also have to be one of the priorities and need to be considered to be a part of the discussion within the diplomatic communities as well. So yeah, talking about digital diplomacy, first, we use social media, but not just for about presence, but really answer, and I seconded Pak Yanuar about delivering better public service. And second, not only focusing on the social media as a tool, but also focusing on other kind of digital means to actually better serve the diplomatic functions and also overall public services. So yeah, that's from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now to bring this to a close, I think I would like to remind us again. So the idea today is to discuss the advances in research in government social media utilization and digital diplomacy. But not only that, we have highlighted some of the research, we actually have gone beyond, and then we have addressed or identified some of the challenges and even provide ideas to overcome these challenges and the next step forward. So I would like to thank again the great insights from both of our panelists and three of our panelists, apologies. Two of them are live with us today, Mbak Treviliana, Bapak Dedy, and Bapak Dedy, apologies, and Pak Yanuar Nugroho. I wish you all well, and I know that this is late in where you are right now, so very thankful for the insights, and I would like to return the time to Sabrina, our host again. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Mas Bagus. Thank you, Mbak Trevi.
Thank you, Pak Yanuar, Pak Bagus.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Bagus. Such an interesting discussion that we just witnessed tonight in this session. Hopefully, after this event, all participants and audiences here gain this valuable knowledge and can share the information with everyone else. However, not to worry, if they missed the event, they can watch it again through youtube.com/GSMS Indonesia. This comes to the end of the Regional Government Social Media on Digital Diplomacy 2022. I'd like to thank our moderator, Bapak Bagus Muljadi, our speakers, Ibu Treviliana Eka Putri, Bapak Yanuar Nugroho, dan Bapak Dedy Permadi, for such an insightful discussion. Also to all participants, also to all our participants that would like to receive the e-certificate for this event, please fill in the form that's been shared by the committee through the chat box so that the committee can get your details and send the e-certificate straight to you. We would like to also thank the hosts for making this event happen, Ministry for Foreign Affairs, the Government Social Media Summit, UKINCIS, and the support from Kominfo, Aurago, No Limit, and Ikatan Pranata Humas Indonesia. Also, we would like to invite all participants to take a photo together with also the speakers, if you're still here with us. Please open your camera and show us your best pose. I'll count in 3, 2, 1. Another page, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Good evening from Jakarta, Indonesia. Thank you for participating. We hope all of you gain valuable information from this event. Stay healthy and see you on the next events. Goodbye.